It is a race to the top, but I believe it is a race that every BYU Cougar fan can get behind.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Amazon with their Fire TV Stick 4K. The good news is turn any TV into your Xbox, no console required. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more about how to do it today. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about BYU and basketball and football and their race to the top of the Big 12 Conference. We'll also talk about essentially a must-get for BYU in the transfer portal that emerged yesterday, and we'll finish up today's show talking a little BYU baseball, and do they need more love shared their way? All right, so without further ado, let's dive right in. I had a question sent to me via email yesterday from Ethan, and he asked this. He said, Jake, my question for you is, which of these two programs would you take to win a Big 12 title first? And he said, essentially said the timeline is the next 5 years. And he said the race is between BYU football and BYU basketball. Obviously headed up by two very strong coaches. They are the two premier programs in the BYU athletic department. It was a very interesting question, so I figured I would pose it here on the podcast and answer it for the masses. Now, the bigger point to be made here is that both of these programs are on an upward trajectory. We have seen what Kevin Young has absolutely done in record fashion, taking BYU's recruiting to just an absolutely elite tier. Yesterday, Duke got a commit that pushed BYU's recruiting class. Oh, man, it dropped all of one spot to number 3 in the country. A couple of seasons ago, I think it was Cougar Stats put this out. It might have been somebody else on social media, but I saw them retweet it, I think, that BYU went from being ranked 103rd in the recruiting rankings on 24/7 Sports, and this recruiting cycle is just wrapping up here. BYU's 3rd in the entire country. Absolutely revolutionary work by Kevin Young. We discussed that more in detail in yesterday's podcast. If you want more detail on that with regards to guys like Richie Saunders returning, the commitment of Kennard Davis Jr., what it means for BYU basketball. But that does not obviously preclude what BYU football is doing. Kalani Sitake struggled through his first year in the Big 12 Conference. They went 5-7, and there were a whole lot of question marks about this team. Well, they bounced back with a thoroughly impressive 11-2 record last year and capped it off with an absolute dominant Alamo Bowl showing, crushing the Colorado Buffaloes, and in some people's minds, essentially costing Shedeur Sanders multiple rounds in the NFL draft. That's a story for another day. But the bigger point is these are two programs who look like they're ascending towards the top of the Big 12 Conference. And really the question I think Ethan poses is valid. In the next 5 years, who would I favor to win a Big 12 title first? Well, let me just say this. I'm going to say BYU basketball. And the reason why I say it is because I believe that basketball, we have a transcendent star, and that's what BYU is projecting, or many are projecting, a guy like AJ DeBonsa to be for the BYU basketball program. If you have one or two just truly outstanding players, you can look back in BYU basketball history when they've had their best players in program history. They have led them to some pretty high heights. Remember, Jimmer Fredette led them to the Sweet 16, and had he probably had Brandon Davies available, that's a team that has a shout to make a Final Four run. Also, going back, the deepest BYU's ever gone in the NCAA tournament was with Danny Ainge. I would consider him one of the all-time GOATs, if not the all-time GOAT for BYU basketball. Well, when history suggests that basketball, when you have a dominant superstar or superstars, in the case of what I think next year's team has in both Richie Saunders alongside AJ DeBonsa, you also add some role players who have got star-making capability in their own right. Guys like Robert Wright III, I think Kennard Davis Jr., he's got some of that in him. It means the BYU basketball is going to, I think, have a better chance or more ready-made chance to win the Big 12 title faster than I believe BYU football does. But that doesn't mean I don't think BYU football can't win it in the next 5 years. There's a very strong case that BYU, should they replicate their success from this past year and tweak it just a little bit, get a little more accuracy from Jake Retzlaff, that defense just get a little more stingy. They avoid the letdown performances like they had against the likes of Kansas. And this is a team, they were essentially a whisker away from playing in the Big 12 title game last year. So they could have rendered this entire thing moot had they come through last season. I still think both of these programs are poised to absolutely take over the Big 12 and help BYU ascend to the top of the conference and hopefully have some staying power there. But if you want me to answer the question bluntly, Ethan, I think it's absolutely BYU basketball who has the best chance or best hopes of winning a Big 12 title in the next 5 years. The other caveat to it, and as to why I believe BYU basketball has it, is that once again, when you have 15 or 17 guys, we'll see what the roster size ultimately pans out to be in the aftermath of the House settlement that's supposed to be finalized at any point in the near future. You have fewer guys, and a single player or a couple of players can have an outsized role in that circumstance to lead you to pretty high heights. With regards to football, you have 11 guys on the field at any given time, and you're relying on 10 other guys outside of yourself if you're in that 11-man rotation or that unit to do their job to help you have success on the field. Kalani Sitake and his staff, guys like Aaron Roderick is his offensive coordinator. Jay Hill is the associate head coach in D.C. Also, Kelly Papinga bringing special teams to bear last year for BYU. BYU was made up of the sum total of its parts. They played complementary football, and that's a buzzword that Kalani Sitake likes to use a lot, is talking about wanting to see his guys play complementary football. The good news is BYU has gotten that in large doses in football, but there is so much more of a variable or variables in college football in my mind that lead me to think that the chances of either one of these programs ascending to the top of the Big 12 conference, I'm putting my money on BYU basketball. But I also do think that both of these programs in the next half a decade, the next 5 years, I think both of them could absolutely hoist the trophies in their respective sports and prove that they are the Big 12's best. That's the exciting part for BYU. Even if you don't agree with my assessment that BYU basketball is probably poised to hoist the trophy first and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament alongside it, hopefully, I think that both of these programs have got stellar head coaches who are all in with BYU, guys like Kevin Young, who obviously spurned opportunities at the NBA level to bring his style to BYU, and Kalani Sitake, he bleeds blue. The Cougars, the BYU, just Cougars flow through his veins. He's a BYU guy through and through, and he wants nothing more than to put on for his alma mater. And those two, I think what the passion that they hold within them for BYU sports and their respective programs as well, that can lead BYU to some pretty fun things. And ultimately, if BYU does, let's say they do win one title in basketball and one title in football in the next 5 years, that'd be a pretty compelling case for BYU being one of the top, if not the top program in the Big 12 conference. And we've heard guys like Rondo Feldberg say that BYU doesn't want to beat its chest and say, hey, we are the proverbial big dog in this conference. We want people to say it for us. Well, the reason you get that said for you is when you go out and win those titles and you become the envy of everybody else in the conference. So it's all there for the taking for BYU, but I think it's a very, very compelling question. But the more important thing is both of these programs look like they're right there, and they'll be in the mix for the foreseeable future, challenging for hardware and chances to make a run at national titles in both sports. All right, coming up next, BYU football. There are guys every so often that pop up in the transfer portal. You say, you know what? That's a tailor-made fit for BYU. Well, one of those guys came along yesterday from Oklahoma State. Who is he, and why is he so critical to BYU's hope for success this year? We'll introduce you to Justin Kirkland next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game, my friends. Anybody who's been there, every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment seemingly feels huge. It's electric in the arena. With Game Time, you can be part of that action without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. And the best part is prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, with their last-minute deals saving you up to 60% off the prices. The all-in pricing feature in the app is my favorite feature with Game Time. It shows you exactly what you're paying right up front. There's no surprise fees being tacked on the end. The price you see is the price you pay, and I can get with that. It's one of my favorite parts about this. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, and of course, it's all guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're having a fantastic Tuesday, wherever you might be out there. Now, BYU football is working hard to bolster their lineup for the upcoming football season, and the transfer portal window has closed. And I had a couple of people point this out to me saying, Jake, I'm seeing people still names pop up in the transfer portal. So let me school you to the game a little bit before we dig into Justin Kirkland. With the transfer portal, when you submit your name to the compliance department at your university to go into the portal, they are required in the next 2 business days to enter your name into the portal. So therefore, guys who may have entered their name late on a Friday night, last Friday before the portal window closed, well, their school is under no obligation to get to that paperwork until yesterday or today. There could still be some names that pop up in the portal as late as today, just with that 48-hour, 2 business day rule that's in effect for the NCAA transfer portal. Well, one guy who entered his paperwork on Friday showed up in the portal yesterday, and he is what the doctor ordered for BYU football, particularly along their defensive front. The name, Justin Kirkland. Why is he so critical to BYU's chances of making a run at the Big 12 crown this year? Simply put, he is a huge human being and absolutely fits a need for BYU in their defensive front. Now, Keanu Tanavasa was one of the crown jewels of BYU's transfer portal cycle to date. Obviously, Keanu figures to potentially be a team captain, even though he's been in BYU not that long. He is a leader of men. That's what I love about New, is he is more than capable of having guys rally around him and him following them. The biggest question mark for BYU is, do they have adequate depth at defensive tackle to hold up alongside him, and more importantly, just to hold up overall going into the season? If you've been paying attention to the transfer portal for BYU, there's been a few names from the defensive tackle room that have exited the program. Guys like Nuole Tauselison, Joshua Singh, also Carson Tuje, and then Iosefa Latuli. Those are 4 guys of I think there were 8 defensive tackles or 9 defensive tackles listed on the spring roster. So when you lose potentially as much as 50% or just a shade under that from your position group, you're like, hey, suddenly we're pretty thin. Currently, BYU has John Taumoepeau, Anisi Purcell, and Keanu Tanavasa, who figure to kind of be the top 3 at defensive tackle, with Luke To'omalatai obviously in the mix as well. But Luke was sitting out with a significant knee injury that he suffered early on in spring camp, and it is TBD on what his return window will be for the BYU football program. So essentially right now, you're looking at it, and I need to correct one thing. Also need to mix the name Asani Tuwala into the mix. So you have 5 guys at defensive tackle right now, one of which is an injury concern, and like I said, the return window on him is TBD. That is why Justin Kirkland is just a tailor-made fit for BYU. He is a native of the state of Utah, grew up in West Haven up there in northern Utah, went to Roy High School, played with guys like Parker Kingston, had a fantastic high school career at Roy High, then embarked on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And coming out of high school, he was severely under-recruited. I'll just be very frank about that. And he was also a guy that was during the COVID-19 pandemic years when recruiting really got curtailed. Well, he ultimately committed to Utah Tech in 2020. They enrolls with the Trailblazers down there in St. George, plays a really, really strong freshman campaign, ends up, I think, he has 32 total tackles, 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and then 1 pass breakup as a freshman. And for his play for an otherwise nondescript Utah Tech team that year, hit the portal and became a very hot commodity in the transfer portal market. And that's where Oklahoma State came in and scooped him up. The past 2 years, he has played in all 26 games for Oklahoma State that they have played. And he has totaled 40 tackles with 15 tackles for loss in that span. And those numbers may not, so played in all 26 of their games, 7 tackles for loss and a sack. Now, those numbers may not scream, wow, this is a guy we have to have, Jake. Let me be very blunt about this. As a defensive tackle, particularly a nose tackle, because Justin Kirkland, if you aren't privy to how big he is listed at 6'3", 345 pounds. He is built like a freaking tank. He is a well put together human being, and it's pretty proportional. That's the best part about it. And his numbers, do not scream major production, but that's not his role in the defense. He would fill a role for BYU as a gap stuffer, a gap filler. And yes, he'll get his tackles. He'll get past breakups with his hands up in traffic when it comes to passing downs. But his overall role for BYU, should he come to Provo, is to be the guy who picks up double and triple teams, allowing guys like Keanu Tanavasa and the other defensive lineman at defensive end for BYU to wreak havoc in the backfield. It is a thankless and it's a really, really grimy job to do as a nose tackle. It's something that's you kind of like exist like a long snapper. Very few people know your name, but your success is ultimately the team's success because very few people recognize what you do out there on the football field. But Justin Kirkland, a guy from the state of Utah, served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He's married, and he's got one more year to get it right in college football, having already produced multiple years at the Power 4 level. Yeah, this is a guy that I would label as a must-get for the BYU football program. BYU's not the only one that's going to be after him. The University of Utah has a situation where they need some defensive tackle depth as well. You can guarantee they'll be knocking down his door, seeing what his interest level is. But having former teammates of his like a Parker Kingston that could play a role in helping recruit him to Provo, pull out all the stops you have to do if you're BYU. Say exactly what you envision for him as a role. And I would essentially tell him, you come in here, there's a very likely chance you're starting game one for BYU come this fall. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form to be negative towards other guys at defensive tackle for BYU. Guys like Kanisi Purcell, who are also transfer portal additions to this program, who are expected to take on a bigger role. John Taumueapea had a really strong season a year ago, I felt like, considering the circumstances he found himself in. But Justin Kirkland fits exactly like a tailor-made fit for what BYU's defense needs. They need a gap-stuffing nose tackle who does that dirty work, eats up double and triple teams, and would allow a guy like Keanu Tanavasa, who is elite at wreaking havoc in opposing backfields, to go out there and be a one-man wrecking crew. If it is possible, I will just say this publicly, BYU has to get Justin Kirkland. And I don't say that very often on this podcast because there are so many variables. NIL's a role, obviously get scheme fit, all the different things. But everything I see with Justin Kirkland scream, BYU needs him. And in many respects, I think he would do well to team up with BYU because I think it could enhance exactly what he's looking for in his final season of collegiate eligibility. So make it happen, Jay Hill, Sione Puha, Kalani Sitake, all the different people who would have a role in recruiting this young man, Gary Anderson as well. Whoever it takes to get in his ear and say, come on home, play for the BYU Cougars, and let's do something special this year, and let's show Oklahoma State what they're missing. You got to make it happen. It feels like this is exactly what BYU's been looking for in the transfer portal, because I would label defensive tackle depth and defensive tackle play overall as their priority number one in the transfer portal right now. And when you have a perfect fit like Justin Kirkland come along, you simply cannot lose out on that opportunity if you're BYU. All right, coming up next, we'll flip over and talk a little BYU baseball. Now, I've been kind of kicking around ideas of how I wanted to approach this conversation, and I don't necessarily think I have a perfect analogy for it, but I do believe this is a program that is getting the least amount of love of any program on BYU's campus in their athletic department, and I'll explain why next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Obviously, all of us want to have extra fun when it comes to watching these games. It heightens the sense of enjoying it, obviously winning alongside it. From three-pointers to steals to assists, they have many different ways to bet on your favorite player props. More importantly, if you want to bet on your favorite teams as well, or just a team you believe in, all of it's there for you guys. And after the game tips off, you can combine all your live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win even bigger than you would with the individual bets themselves. So do not miss out and head to FanDuel.com today to claim that $250 in bonus bets. Once again, that's FanDuel.com today to claim up to $250 in bonus bets from our friends at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU that I am hearing every single day coming to your phone in the form of a text message. The best part is you can fire back with your thoughts. We can have one-on-one conversations as well. And it's been a really, really fun addition to the podcast. It helps support the show, but in addition, helps build the community aspect around the podcast as well. The best part is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you charge a single dime, and it's just $5 a month after that to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Actually, it's just $4.99. So I would encourage you, if you are on the fence, join us today and find out what you've been missing out on. All right, before we go on today's show, let's have a discussion about the BYU baseball program. Now, if you've been paying attention to BYU baseball this spring, it has been rough, to use a word. They are currently second to last in the Big 12 conference among the 14 teams who play baseball in this league. The only team worse than them is their arch rival, the University of Utah. Yes, the Utes are one game behind BYU, moored at the bottom of the Big 12 standings. The concern I have for BYU baseball, and I have had this conversation offline with a handful of you, and I know a number of you who I've had this conversation with are everydayers who listen to this podcast religiously, and I thank you for it. And your concerns are valid. The concerns essentially come down to, they feel like BYU baseball is the redheaded stepchild of the BYU athletic department, and they don't feel like they're getting enough love, or they're not having enough support to really have any level or any modicum of success that I think would satisfy BYU fans. Now, I do not want to see BYU baseball go away by any means. I think that'd be absolutely dumb for BYU to cut bait and say, hey, we're going to take maybe the best backdrop in all of collegiate baseball and just say, you know what, we're done with it. The other thing is BYU has invested to a certain level. They put in that turf field that is capable of melting at multiple inches of snow in like hours to allow the BYU baseball program to play earlier home games in the season than they ever have before. Remember, this is a sport that cold weather schools are already at a disadvantage because, simply put, it's tough to get out on the field during the winter months. You have teams down there in Texas, down there in Florida, in the case of UCF, which UCF, strangely enough, not very good this year. But bigger point is, cold weather schools like BYU are at a disadvantage in terms of competing at a high level in baseball. And that's not to say that BYU hasn't competed at a high level in baseball. They have done that. There's history out there. Jack Morris is a MLB Hall of Famer, pitched for BYU. Vance Law, Wally Joyner. I can go down the list of the who's who from BYU baseball yesteryear. The issue at hand right now is, it doesn't seem like the BYU athletic administration, at least from my vantage point, like I said, I'm an armchair analyst. I work in a closet under the stairs, quite literally. Much you like to clown on me for my studio, it's literally a closet under the stairs. I'm not hiding from that fact. But the bigger point I want to make here is, from my vantage point, it does not seem to me that BYU baseball has an advocate or advocates in the athletic administration hierarchy to get it the resources it needs. And what I'm speaking more of is a way for talent acquisition. And what does that come down to in this day and age? Yes, NIL. You need money. You need to be able to compete for high-level talent. The other thing is, we're watching baseball programs that are succeeding at a very high level. They invest in the sport. Yes, BYU put in a new field not that long ago. They're putting in new batting cages under I think it's the left field stands down there at Larry H. Miller Ballpark. That's all awesome stuff. But it seems like it's almost the bare minimum to stay somewhat relevant in the sports world, in the baseball world. There are other programs out there, and they're coming into the state of Utah and picking off the best high school talent we have in the state. Not to mention, if they're good enough, MLB teams are scooping them up in the amateur draft right out of high school. That's the other part about this, is talent acquisition. It has never been tougher, it feels like, for guys like Trent Pratt to go out and swing for the fences, as it were, for top-tier talent. BYU baseball is a program that's got a very, very strong tradition. And frankly put, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The thing is, I love going out to Miller Ballpark, and I have had multiple compatriots of mine, the Locked On Network and other Big 12 media types, who, when they see the backdrop of Miller Park and see the mountains right there and just how incredible it looks like, I've got to get to Provo and watch this. The sad part is, I don't think the BYU baseball program on field product matches up with that majestic backdrop. I would like to see them rebound. And they had a good win against Grand Canyon yesterday in their final game down there in Arizona after they got absolutely demolished by Arizona State over the weekend. There was a game they gave up 8 home runs, and we all know that collegiate pitching is at an absolute premium because arms, simply put, are the most valued commodity in baseball. And the best arms out of the high school ranks and all the collegiate ranks, usually in the MLB farm systems. So I don't have a perfect solution for what is going to cure BYU baseball, but I am sincerely hoping, and this is not a dig at Tom Homo, this is not a dig at anybody in the BYU athletic administration, but I hope that they can give a little more love and maybe direct, maybe there's a donor out there who is saying, hey, there's a sport I'd like to make my pet project to help lift them up. I would direct them to BYU baseball and kind of point to the history and say, this is a program that's kind of fallen on hard times. And I don't think it's for a lack of effort on Trent Pratt's part or his team. Trent Pratt inherited a really, really tough situation after Mike Littlewood stepped aside suddenly when it seemed like Mike Littlewood had things rolling a little bit here. Pratt's tried to pick up the pieces, and he's done, I think, a fairly decent job of bringing talent into this program. But if you pay attention to collegiate baseball recruiting, and I'll be blunt, I'm not the most up to date on it, but I see more and more often, it seems like the top tier talent from the state is being picked off. It's going to places like TCU. It's going to warm weather schools who are invested in baseball to a whole level beyond what BYU is invested in their baseball program at. So whenever this changeover from Tom Homo to the next athletic administration takes place, I would hope that whoever takes over that chair from Tom Homo, maybe they will pay a little more attention, give a little more love to BYU baseball, and help it get back to maybe more of what it was of yesteryear. It's a really, really strong tradition there. And I think there's a lot of people out there who have got connections to BYU baseball, whether they play the MLB level or they're currently coaching out there in collegiate baseball, that you could tap into more readily than you already are. We already know that the BYU network across, I'm talking just the university itself, Brigham Young University, and the network literally worldwide, there are BYU people. You don't have to know a BYU person, but if you say, hey, I was a student at BYU, I'm looking to get into this field, BYU's connections in every facet, in every field seemingly under the sun, BYU alumni are more than willing to step in and help other BYU people out. And that's where I think BYU baseball could benefit from an injection of some of that alumni coming back and giving it more love and giving it some more direction. There are people, like I said, at the MLB level, at the collegiate level, maybe even at the high school level that could help BYU get on a more positive trajectory. It's not going to be easy. As a cold weather school, you work at a severe disadvantage, especially in a league like the Big 12 that's got pretty strong baseball programs in it. But I hope that BYU baseball can be a more, I don't know what I'm trying to say, a better funded and a better loved up sport than it seems to be right now from the BYU athletic administration. This is going to come off as a hatchet job. I understand that. I'm sure there'll be people who are upset that I'm criticizing what BYU and their handling of the BYU baseball program is. But I also know, like I said, those conversations we've had with folks out there, there's a lot of consternation around this team as well, that they want the on-field product to match what BYU has in terms of that backdrop there at Miller Park and be a program that BYU fans can be proud of. I believe from the outset when BYU joined the Big 12 Conference that BYU baseball, among many other sports, was maybe put at the worst disadvantage in terms of the conference transition, and that's kind of proven to be true. But I think given the adequate resources, given some extra love, I do think it could be a program that BYU fans could coalesce around and support maybe to a little higher degree than they are currently. It also goes for the BYU athletic administration. All right, I'll step off my soapbox now. I'll wrap up this edition of the show. But as always, thank you for supporting this show. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends. Let them know this is a daily podcast, all featuring all BYU content all the time. And once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.